Up first, Julien, and he's going to talk about why this should be called Lalo Camp.
So I have a title slide so that my talk will be a little less painful for you because it is last a bit. It will be a bit less long than if I didn't have it. So I have like 18 slides of YAML for you. The first thing you should know about YAML is that when you have a YAML file, you can actually have multiple documents into it. Don't try to fit that into an actual software because most of the time you will get unexpected results, right? Then whether you have a value or you have something called null as a value will be exactly the same for YAML. And basically if you actually want null as a string, you need to explicitly quote that. We are still in the beginning of the talk. Now we have a list of countries, except that one of them is not a country. So Norway in the top is not Norway, it's actually false in YAML. Because yes and no can be just true and false in YAML. So have fun with that. So when you have a version number, if you just put 1.3.0, it is a version number. But if you just put 1.3 like as a branch name and then you want to put that in a Jenkins file, something like that, then 1.3 becomes like a float. So you can have spaces in keys. So this is actually a map in YAML, and if you can, you can also quote the key so that you can also have a colon inside your YAML key. So this is really something nice when you try to read YAML. Oh yeah, YAML doesn't care if you have duplicate keys also. So if by mistake you have multiple times the same key, yeah, you will get, I don't know which result. Some software like Ansible will actually warn you like, hey, I have found multiple keys. You can also have like something that's a number as a key, and then the end result will be maybe like 0.50, or it will depend on the parser what you will get at the end. Because most of the languages have maps with only strings at the beginning. Yeah, you can have new lines in key names. So this is a key with multiple lines into it. So if you really want to mess up with your software, you can also do this. So basically, this is a map, and the key has just 2 lines. Yeah. And yeah, of course, you can have empty keys. So this is a map, and the second key is empty. If you want more fun, you could duplicate that empty key. So you can. That one is actually useful. So you can have multi-lines in YAML. So this is maybe the first useful slide you will have in this talk. And sometimes you want to write multi-line, but that it ends up in just one line. So this one is also sometimes useful if you want to wrap your text. So enjoy this useful slides, because there is still some good stuff coming. So now you can decide that you don't want the new line at the end. So this is the same as the previous one. So you have multiple lines, but then it will not end with a new line, which in some cases are quite useful. But sometimes you actually want the new lines, and you want a lot of new lines, so you can add the plus sign. And then you can have as many new lines as you want at the end of your string, which I guess a lot of people want that all the time, right? We are not done yet. 18 slides. Oh yeah, you have sets in YAML. So it means that if you have a duplicate element, then it will not be duplicated in the output. The issue is that then you cannot have values, so it is just a map with empty values. Yeah, you have ensure, so instead of repeating yourself, you can just say, okay, in this case, Ghent is a Belgian city, so Antwerp is a Belgian city, so I will not repeat the map inside it. So in this case, you have the duplication of code. This is sometimes useful. And then you can decide to just do inheritance, so that Ghent is a country in Belgium, it has a TLD, but Antwerp doesn't. But so we take the map of Antwerp and we just override this as TLD. And at the end, you have the resulting map at the bottom. So at the end, maybe you just want to write JSON and be done with that, so that you have the expected output, because YAML is a superset of JSON in the version 1.2. So everywhere you have YAML, you can just use JSON, which is also fix the issue that you know if your file is finished or not. Yeah, so you can just use all those nice YAML trips, but when it's 3 a.m. and your coworkers look at the YAML files and they say, what is wrong with this? They might not like you anymore. So thank you for listening.
Are you going to talk about the YAML provider for Augias?
No. That's not possible. Hi. So I'm Rafael Pinson, and this is your yearly reminder about the OGS project. I'm apparently the only OGS developer that's still attending this conference, so I wouldn't miss that. So who am I? I'm an infrastructure developer. I've been contributing to OGS and OGS providers for a few years and contributing quite a bit to Puppet and the Puppet ecosystem. Yeah, sorry. I'm working for Camp, which is a company based in Switzerland, France, and Germany. We do open source development and integration in different fields, GIS, business, so ERPs and infrastructure. And we've been using and contributing to Puppet since 2008 and contributing to the Forge. So when it comes to manipulating files in Puppet, there's different ways of doing it. There's lots of different tools. You can do file with static or dynamic content. You can do concat. You can do file line. So which one is the best option? And there's various debates about this. The first thing, and I think it applies to a lot of other tools as well, is that we tend to make the tools want to do a bit too much than what they should do. And this tool should really do the bare minimum and be like a glue. For example, when you want to deploy software, package it. If you want to manage a whole configuration instead of several little bits, the easiest is still to use a simple file. Or use, if you have multiple contexts, a conf.d directory when it's supported by the software with purge or concat or another approach that is similar. But if you want to manage discrete configuration entries, so not the whole configuration, you can use conf.d directory or native resource types, which will edit the configuration as you see fit. And when it comes to these resource types, there's native resource types that exist in Puppet and in other tools in a similar way, like host, mail alias that will edit the files, etc. host, etc. aliases. There's modules such as in setting. And in all other situations, a lot of people just resort to using file line, which is kind of, edit if no such line in CF engine, which is kind of horrible. And that's where OGS comes in. Oh, sorry, this is horrible, this picture. OGS is kind of a scalpel for configuration management where you can edit configuration files, and it's got over 300 parsers that allow to do this with very specific syntax. There's been an OGS type in Puppet that allows you to use it directly and make changes to your configurations for a very long time. But in a lot of cases, it's not very easy to use, and it's not very easy to make idempotent when you want to make very specific changes. So that's why the OGS Providers project was born, and it was created by Dominique Cleal originally, and then I joined a bit later. And it provides a resource abstraction. It provides a declarative API to create types and resources for Puppet, and there's about 20 existing types. So it benefits from OGS's power and flexibility, but you don't need to know OGS and how the library works in order to use it. So it hides the complexity, and it provides enhanced resource types that you can use directly in Puppet. For example, for shellvar to modify configuration files for bash. So there's lots of different types that exist that are provided in the project. For Apache, for Nagios, for PAM. The most used one is probably shellvar because you've got a lot of configuration files using just shell. And they're not as simple to edit as one may think. So here are some examples, just with shellvar and sshd config, the most used ones. So here, using shellvar to make sure one parameter is present in an array in etc default grab and not touch anything else in that file, or with sshd config editing rules for a match group. You can just use this in your Puppet code. Simply install the module, so OGS Providers shellvar or OGS Providers SSH, and just use the types that are provided by that module. Moreover, because this is a library, this before, you can also purge resources, like a lot of resources in Puppet. If they're unshareable and you can list all the resources, you can also purge them, which allows you to manage, for example, your whole sshd config file in the form of several parameters that you manage separately and purge the whole thing. You can actually extend it because it's a library with a documentation and it's declarative. So it's already been used in various modules, such as the Puppet 7 module from Vox Populi, or some modules that we have at Camp to Camp. So essentially, I'm not going to get into details, but you can just declare, if you use OGS a bit, you can declare the resource path, so where you will find your resource in the OGS tree based on the parameters of the resource, and then it will compute most of the way to manage that resource automatically. But you know, we don't do a lot of Ruby these days, and a lot of the new tools are based on Go, actually. So how about integrating this in new tools like Terraform, like Docker and so on? There is a library called Narcissus, because of the joke on mythology and reflection, so you can check this out. Well, thanks for listening to me, and you can come see me if you have questions, and I have stickers as well.
Oh, yeah. That's the one.
Hi everyone, so I am Alexandre, I come from France. Maybe some of you are used to Rudder. You know that we don't speak too much technical, we are more on a business purpose, so this talk will not be strange. It will be also basically on the business side of the config management. So what is config management and what is a compliance in config management? We are not the only one that talking about that anymore. And so I was asking myself, why should I just discuss with you of what is a configuration management? We are now, there is like 30 years that configuration management is existing. Everyone know here what is a configuration management. And for a few years now, maybe 1, 2, 3 years, there is more and more solution that talking about compliance. So why? Why of that? So I just began to say, okay, what is configuration management? So I just Google it and find in the Wikipedia the definition. And configuration management is not only a tool, but it's a process first that ensure consistency of your product or anything that you want, because it's engineering first through all the life. And I think that this is also why we talk about a desired state, and this is why our tool is like that. So configuration management is automation, sure, but what it ensures? The consistency in IT environment is more about availability, it's about reliability and scalability, of course, because of automation. But more and more, there is also security. That was something very old that I think that every sysadmin thinks about also is security. And configuration management seems to be very good for that kind of purpose. But do you trust your configuration management? How many trust his configuration management and never check the log, for example? Pretty sure that no one gonna raise her hands or his hands, because we're not sure about the consistency of our product. And it's very simple. It's automation, sure, but we don't automate just for the automation purpose. We are doing this because of a business purpose, because we're delivering a service to our customers. And so, of course, we have to make sure that everything is all right. Because every time you need a hack, you need a feedback about, does my compliance is okay? Does my configuration management is okay? Does my automation is okay? And we need that feedback. For example, when I first begin with just some scripts and others, you always doing, or even me, I'm always making this dollar question mark every time, because if I don't get the feedback as everything is okay, I'm not sure. So as I told you, configuration management now focusing on the compliance purpose. So we can see our friend of Puppet, our friend of Saltstack, and I probably missed some others. Of course, I put Rudder one. And compliance is now a target for every businesses here in compliance, in configuration management. But don't be fooled about that. So every time on the marketing purpose, it's about security stuff. And yeah, there is money on the market of securities, of course. And compliance is very, very near on the risk assessment and risk remediation that all the chief information security officer get in mind and get you a budget for. But this is now how about the security stuff. It's about getting feedbacks and knowing that what you're doing and can proving it. So, yeah, I'm trying to find just some words of waiting that it come from the next slides. Sorry about that. So, security compliance is not the real purpose about this compliance approach of Puppet Remediate, of Rudder, on Saltstack SecOps and others. Of course, there is business purpose for that and with a good focus on the security standards. But it's a side effect. Firstly, we need the feedbacks. We need feedbacks that have real meaning. We need to understand and we need to get it quick. So if you have an immediate feedback, then you know that it's all okay or maybe not, and you can make something against that. So remember that security is a good market purpose, but feedback is really important, and I think that it's really important, and I think this is why Rudder have this compliance approach even in the Rudder open source project for everyone, and not on an enterprise version or anything. Because without any feedbacks, you don't know what you are doing, and if you don't know what you are doing, you're probably going wrong. Thank you.
You ready? Hi, I'm Jay Goldberg, and I'm here to talk to you about how I'm doing way less configuration these days. Changing how we think about configuration management has saved us time and effort, reduced risk, and improved performance. So I used to develop the Unix operating system at Unix System Labs, IBM, and AT&T. I've been automating infrastructure for 25 years, and I'm now at 2 Sigma, a financial firm in New York. They say we learn from our failures, and so here's some of what I've learned at my current job. Our first configuration management system was conveniently written in a scripting language, which looked like an invitation to rewrite our scripts in the configuration management system. This caused us tremendous performance problems and was a really, really bad idea. So we switched to a new configuration management system. The new one was written in C with a domain-specific language that was declarative for configuration, and we re-implemented our scripts again, only now they didn't even make sense. So it cost us a fortune to drag this code along with us, and here's a CPU graph of a system that's doing nothing but configuration management in our old way of doing it. Our users complained bitterly about the impact that we were having on their systems. So in order to make a difference, we had to change how we think about configuration management. Since we had to solve the problem for containers and public cloud, we asked ourselves, well, can we consider all of our infrastructure to be immutable? We went down that path for a little while, and we found that we would have some other problems. So we knew that we would have at least hundreds of different configurations stored as system images, which would both increase and hide the complexity of configuration management. And that's like the exact opposite of what we wanted to optimize for. So thinking about timescales was a big help. I mean, there's very little that needs to change quickly on your systems. Things like self-service changes for users. There's some things that need to change by environment, like if you open a new data center, and the vast majority of things you only ever handle once in the lifetime of a system. So thinking in terms of this led us to the principle of least configuration, which is really simply provide a working configuration by default and do the least amount of configuration change possible for customization. It sounds obvious, but it took us a long while to get there, and we didn't really think about the problem. So we moved to tools that actually support these timescales, and our configuration management system now gets self-service changes out to users quickly. And for everything else, we use packages for the majority of things that never really change. Now, we use atomic operations for most of the things that we do. So, like instead of editing a system configuration file, we'll drop in a small override file in a .d directory. And we do the same thing by using systemd. So systemd, the units themselves are atomic, and it allows drop-in files, which lets you override the configuration of even a single parameter. This lets us do less configuration and do it more safely. And so we now build configuration packages that leverage these patterns. So here's one for how we configure how frequently our configuration management runs. In the package, we define a few curated self-service options, and we let users choose. Our configuration management database allows this self-service. So we store our business logic in the configuration management database, which unit tests and exports atomic files, which our configuration management system delivers to the hosts as they're needed, and only where we need to deliver change quickly. And our configuration management system is all data-driven now. It's back to kind of Eric's talk, I guess. So here's an example of updating app sources. All we do is we parse a common configuration file format, and the configuration management system just does its thing. What we get out of this is that our configuration changes are now smaller and safer. They rarely require any code. We've freed up 2 engineers to work on other interesting stuff, and any of the products that you're all using today can operate like this. So in practice, this is how it looks. We used to have 110 really redundant pieces of code for managing different parts of the operating system, and we replaced that with 9 data-driven items, mostly the atoms of the operating system, things like files, packages, and services. Back to that CPU graph, what we see now is that we have 93% less code. It runs 30 times faster than it used to, and best of all, it's completely transparent to the users. They don't even complain anymore. If it sounds like a great idea, it is, but it's not a panacea. We still have to do the hard work of configuring our systems. We have to be really careful about complexity because we've moved some configuration into packages. And so we have to think harder and talk more amongst ourselves than before. So it's our ideas that lead us to solutions that work for us. And just remember, the products that you use really don't influence how you think. Thank you very much for letting me share these ideas with you. If anybody wants some more detail, I'm happy to have a discussion with anyone.
Two more before the commercial break.
My name is Paul, and I am an award-winning DevOps thought lord. Paul went out for Ginny. She's with Tupac now. Before DevOps, obviously, we were sysadmins. Oh, sorry. I come here today not to praise DevOps, but to bury it. That's some Shakespeare, because as a DevOps thought leader, I am cultured as fuck. We weren't always DevOpsers. We used to be sysadmins, and we would spend a lot of time writing sendmail CF files, writing poetry in Perl, and playing Halo. And we didn't have a no asshole rule. It was actually encouraged. And then in like 2007, this guy Andrew shows up. You've probably heard of him, and he starts talking about agile infrastructure. We were like, that's never going to work. You're crazy. It turned out it did work, and he's been telling us I told you so ever since. A year later, we got John Allspore and some guy whose name no one ever remembers, did their 10 plus deploys at Flickr Talk. And this was the first day we saw Dev and Ops together on a slide. So this was almost the birth of DevOps, but not quite. A year later, here in Ghent, Patrick Dubois used that creativity that Belgians are famous for and took the word development, operations, and days and jammed them together and created the very first DevOps Days event. Chris would like me to say that he was also involved in that. Being in Belgium, they drank a shit ton of beer and they spent 2 days arguing about how to capitalize the word DevOps. And they maybe never got around to giving it a definition. They later would say that is a feature and not a bug, and that it doesn't need a definition, and that's okay because only terrorists write manifestos. And that left us free to cargo cult DevOps however we wanted. So we fired all of our sysadmins and we hired DevOps teams. The smart sysadmins, we called ourselves DevOpsers. We got like $100,000 a year pay rise. It was fantastic. We were swimming in money. And our vendors were left to just stick a DevOps label in whatever it was they were currently selling, add a couple of zeros to the end, and boom, they were selling DevOps, and they were also making shitloads of money, and we were all really happy. But turned out DevOps became really expensive. Amazon shows up and says, you don't need DevOps, you can do no ops on our cloud, on our platform. And so we fired all of our DevOpsers that day, and we started doing no ops, and we discovered that didn't work out as planned. Unfortunately, all of our DevOpsers had gone and gotten more rewarding jobs doing things like farming for chickens. And so we kind of got into this bind. We didn't have DevOpsers anymore. We didn't have sysadmins anymore. What were we going to do? Thankfully, Google comes along and says, we just invented this new thing. It's exactly like DevOps, but it's totally not DevOps, called Site Reliability Engineering. And we didn't just give a definition, we wrote a whole fucking book about it. Now, I haven't read the book myself, but I'm told that SRE is when a bunch of developers write some software and they give it to the SRE team to run that on Kubernetes. Now, that's a brand new way of working, and I'm sure it's going to work out wonderfully. Unfortunately, there's more to running complex systems and infrastructure than just cargo culting a bunch of cloud-native bullshit. Thankfully, Amazon comes along and says, don't worry, we get rid of the servers. We have this new thing, it's called serverless, there's no servers, therefore no SREs, no DevOpsers, no sysadmins, nothing. It's beautiful and it's amazing. And so we immediately fired all of our SREs as well. If you're not familiar with serverless, that's when you take your WordPress blog and you get the server and you simply throw it away. You might be thinking to yourself, how does that work? Where is my WordPress running? I don't understand. And that's where we have to admit you may need to modify your architecture just a little bit to work on top of this new serverless framework. But look how much simpler it is. Now, Google, not wanting to be outdone, came along and said, we've built this new thing called Knative, and that lets you do serverless on top of Kubernetes inside of your own serverless data centers. And so now we don't have servers anywhere at all. So we don't need sysadmins, we don't need DevOpsers. So I'm actually here today to let you all know that you are fired. I did, however, bring this list of things that you as a DevOps are qualified to do. I'm looking forward to my new job as an electric bath attendant. Thank you.
Didn't Michael tell us like 5 years ago we would all be goat herders?
I can't take this out,
You can.
but you need this for the
We
recording.
need that for the recording too.
Damn it.
Go.
Chris, how am I supposed to drop the mic if I can't take it out of this thing? Hi, so I'm Michael Ducy. I'm going to talk about rethinking open source in the age of cloud. You might have seen me here before giving various talks. So the roots of open source are really kind of in this foundation of the Free Software Foundation, GNU and GCC. And I wear this shirt not because I think RMS is an asshole, which I do, but this shirt is very special to me for a number of reasons. Mainly, it's around how I got started in open source. So back in the day, you had these big, gigantic machines, and it was very, very hard to actually get access to these computers or to the hardware, to actually go and play around and explore the world of computer science. And this is the 80s timeframe. I wasn't doing open source then, by the way. I'm not that old. And then you also had tooling that you needed to actually go and use those big computers. And this tooling was all closed and ran by proprietary software companies. And also, if you had your own computer, it cost a lot of money. So around 1999, somebody wrote a book called, or an essay which turned into a book called The Cathedral and the Bazaar. And in this book, Eric Raymond compared the GNU model of having a bunch of dictators on how they worked and comparing it to the Linux model, which was a much more open model, which we can see in GitHub. But one thing that Eric said in this talk was, every good work of software starts by scratching a developer's personal itch. And I'll let that set while the slide switches. So back in the day, open source was really about this idea of itch scratching, and then also opening access up to compute. And I think this idea of opening up access to compute and data is really the foundational thing of open source that we tend to forget. And a good example of this is PHP versus Cold Fusion versus ASP. Now, PHP was completely free. You could run it on Linux. Cold Fusion was not free, but you could run it on a free OS. And ASP was a completely closed platform that you needed all of Microsoft's software to actually go and run. And the powerful thing about PHP, and at least for me, because this is really how I got started, is that it enabled you to have access to a rich and powerful language. It gave you access to OSS integration so you could start learning other open source software, and then you could run it yourself using open source software. And the other really important thing about open source is this idea of opening up access to compute to a broader range of people. And the one laptop per child is a great example of that, of trying to build a computing platform for under $100 to reach underserved individuals. But if you look at what open source is today, each one of these platinum member spots cost 500,000 US dollars. So that's a lot of money. And now there's a lot of money involved in open source, and we've started to kind of get away from our roots. And so I go back to this quote from Eric Raymond, is that every good work of software starts by scratching a developer's personal itch. Next slide, please. Also an asshole, as someone has commentated. But I change this now to every good work of OSS software starts by scratching a cloud provider's itch, or a VC venture capitalist's itch, right? And that's really how the game has really changed over the years as money has gotten involved. I won't read all the financial information, you can scan through it. But I want to read the quote at the end. Given the relative multiples that Wall Street and private investors are assigning to these open source companies, it seems pretty clear that something special is happening. And so now that there's a lot of money involved, people are starting to rethink the licensing. So MongoDB and Redis had a reactionary license against Amazon, so Amazon couldn't use, and other cloud providers couldn't use their software. Chef actually attacked their open source users by closing the packages. And then a good example was Elastic, which basically what Elastic was trying to do was they realized the Bazaar model and the Cathedral model didn't work, and so they wanted to move everything to a Bazaar type model. So they open sourced all of the software, they restricted its use, but you can still work in the Bazaar type model. And so for every reactionary licensing, there's an equal and opposite reaction from a cloud provider. And you saw that as basically what Amazon did was just rewrite MongoDB and put the MongoDB API in front of it. So you got to go back and look at what the cloud providers' motivations are. And so in open source communities, everyone here should know that. But a cloud provider wants to grow revenue, grow their profit margin, operate at a low cost, their metrics are stock price, and their itch is driving compute consumption, not a developer's itch of getting something done. And so where do we go? I think we should be honest about our intentions. Are we doing open source for open source? Are we doing open source to build a cloud or a business or a software company? Or are we doing open source to run our business? And as open source maintainers, I think we should look at enabling the community rights. So what happened with Chef and the packaging and licensing changes? Can you have community distributed packages? And then also I think important is that as maintainers, we need to partner with the people who are actually using open source to run their business. So the companies that are actually doing it to actually provide a service to consumers or to other businesses and things like that. And I thought I had less time than I did. But thank you very much. I'll be around if anyone wants to talk about open source licensing.
One or two Don't go away yet.
One more.
There's one more ignite. So don't go away yet. There's one more ignite before lunch. The best one.
We gave Toshan and Chris a lot of money, so the doors have been locked, so you can't leave yet.
That's against fire regulations, so no.
It's true. All right, so I'm Gareth. We're from Saltstack. So Saltstack is a automation platform. We do remote execution, we do configuration management, but we also do so much more. And we realize that a lot of people are probably not using Salt, but if you want to use Salt, if you're using something else, come talk to us. You don't have to use all of Salt. You can just use certain portions of it. None of it, it's up to you. Well, not up to you. I shouldn't say that. According to GitHub and Gartner, okay, we're skipping that one. So we have at the current 3,000 individual contributors. We've also started adding work groups because we want our community to have more of an ownership over the project. So we've added a cloud, Salt SSH, Windows, Mac OS, network, test and release, and a new documentation working group. So every month, Salt is downloaded by 3.5 million people, average about 5,000 downloads a day. So a lot of people are using it. Again, if you're interested in using it, just curious about it, come see us at the booth. So Salt is everywhere. We have contributors and users all over the world. Those little grayish dots are people that are just kind of curious about it. The black ones are really excited about it. So yeah, it's used everywhere. So we have a new programming paradigm that our CTO has developed that's pretty exciting. We have a talk tomorrow afternoon in the Salt room, which is B2011, I think, on that's programming, pop-oriented programming. So Heist is a disposable agent. So if you're interested in running Salt, but you can't or don't want to have a minion running on your systems, Heist will let you do that. It sneaks in, does its thing, and like any good Heist, cleans up after itself. Umbra is our venture into AI and machine learning. So come talk to us about that. 20 seconds is a long time. Item is our replacement for our Salt state system. So it's built on top of POP. It's very exciting stuff. Come talk to us about that. Can I skip? No. And I will turn things over to David, who's going to talk to you how you can give us money.
You're eating into my time. Hi, I'm Dave Fidler. The timing on this is awful. Okay, so what do we offer at Saltstack? We offer 3 products. Enterprise, which is all about role-based access control, audit, reporting, that sort of stuff. No, go back. The other thing is we also have... Sorry, guys. So we also have two products in security. So Comply, which is hardening, because 99% of all vulnerabilities are known at the time. And we also do Protect, which is vulnerability management. See, this is how you take control of your architecture. All right, so yeah, we do infrastructure automation, end-to-end builds. I'm not going to talk too much about that because that's what this is about. It's a little weird, I know. Security automation, we are actually the only company out there that does certified CIS configuration scanning, really, and automation. So we'll scan it, we'll fix it, and all of our content is certified by CIS. A lot of big companies use it. This is that waster slide, right? Why do they use us? I'm going to hit the back key in a second. So, tremendous speed, a massive scale, massive flexibility. Saltstack is in and of itself very elegant. And action, that's kind of a throwaway word because it's an automation tool, so it does action. No, go back. So, everyone that uses an automation tool, if they get to a certain scale, they end up using us. And come and talk to us a little bit about why that is. So IBM Cloud, who do they own? They use us to manage 80,000 network switches and routers. They did not use any automation at the beginning. They use us now. I don't know how that's going to work with the acquisition. Hopefully they keep us. I don't see why their marketing department would. But last thing, SaltConf 2020. We are having our first conference in Europe in Geldermalsen. I've destroyed it. That one, yeah, on June 10th and 11th in the Geldermalsen. I'm Canadian. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And I think that's it. Thank you very much.